Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today I would like to share my thoughts on how I think can organized play get better. So back in December I shared a lot of my thoughts on the game in general, on how I think the game can get better. And on this video pretty much everything that I've hoped for have been implemented into the game, which is great. So I would like to continue in this trend and give some more of my feedback. And this video is going to be focusing solely on organized play specifically, not the game in general. So we're only focusing on organized play. So this video is sponsored by Card Market, the best marketplace to buy and sell cards in Europe. Before we get into the meat of the video, I just would like to touch on the fact that with today's stream, it has been confirmed that Thorrk is not going to get banned, at least not for now. So my thought on this, pretty much I shared a video on my opinion on whether Thorrk should be banned or not. My conclusion was that I would be okay either way. I don't think Thorrk needs to be banned because the meta is healthy. However, a lot of people find Thorrk to be quite frustrating, but this is kind of subjective at the end of the day. Me personally, I don't have a problem with playing against Thorrk, and I believe that there's a lot of counters to it, whether on the deck choice you can play or just the way you can play the game. It can mitigate the power of this card. It is undeniably the best card in the meta right now. But I don't think it's always going to be like this. I think we are pretty much experiencing the peak of the power of this card because we are at the core of this force focus set. Next set will be less force focus, and then it's going to rotate out afterwards. So I think that for all those reasons, it makes sense to not do anything. I also believe they could have banned it if there's just enough people who find the card to be frustrating to play against. I could definitely see an argument for simply just banning the card just because it is too frustrating to play against. So I could have seen an argument in favor of banning the card just for that. But it would have been a risk to take because there's no guarantee that the meta that you would have gotten after the ban of Thorrk would have been better, and you would have taken the risk of basically making a lot of the new force cards basically not playable at a competitive level. There's no guaranteed that the competitive cards, the competitive decks that are currently using the force would be good enough with Thorrk out of the way. So this is also taking a risk of making set 5 sort of not super relevant, which to me is a very big risk you could take. That it would basically take in that case. So there's a lot of consideration. I'm not going to go too much into it, but my conclusion was that it would have been okay either way. But they decided not to ban it. Another thing they also shared on the stream is that according to them, the Thorrk is currently trending downward. We're seeing less and less. I think it was 50% of the deck were running Thorrk in the top 64 in the Galactic Championship. And looks like, according to their data, it's down now to 30%, which is a 20% drop, which is very significant. Personally, I didn't really see that in the result that we've seen, but they have more complete data than I do, so I'm assuming they are right. And if that's the case, then that's another indicator that obviously the card should not be banned. Moving on now to the positive of organized play. Before I go into the criticism, I would like to touch on what I believe are the positives of organized play that we've had recently, the recent evolutions of organized play that I think are really positive. So we start off on the promos. I think the promos for the regional qualifiers, sector qualifiers, and Galactic Championships are amazing. So in this case above I put the one from the Galactic Championship, but even the one that we have, the Obi-Wans, the Rey, the Palpatine, and the Kylo Ren, all those promos are also look really amazing, and I really wish this was generalized to all events, not only the regional qualifiers, sector qualifiers, and Galactic Championship. They will also be regionalized to the Store Showdowns and the PQ as well. So yeah, I really hate that OP frame the first OP frame that we got. I think it's really ugly. But if they had all the cards look like this, all the OP cards would look like this, it would be amazing. And please, FFG, stop making foil cards. Like, those foils, Devastator, look absolutely awful. They're all dark and murky. Like, please stop doing them. Like, just improve the foliage, please. Anyway, also the point-based system for qualification is also a great idea, rewarding players on their consistency rather than just only rewarding players who manage to actually win the event. I think that's a really positive evolution of the system as well. I am really satisfied with the amount of free flights and hotel opportunities that they've given out throughout the season, notably to European players. And since now we're going to have a full year of sector qualifiers and regional qualifiers as opposed to just one season before the Galactic Championship, I'm also expecting that there's going to be a lot more opportunities for those for the EU players, and I think that's really, really important. If you're going to be making the event in the US, it needs to be accessible to not everybody, but at least to the best players in the world. If you want to call this the World Championship, you should be seeing the best players in the world from all over the world, and there's a significant amount of people that basically are very, very good player who simply wouldn't make it because it's too expensive to go there, and so it's really, really positive that they're really doing that. So for me that's really, really positive. Next, I'm also really, really awesome to see sealed and draft making it to organized play. That's once again a very positive evolution. I think that sealed and draft should be an inherent part of competitive life of Star Wars Unlimited, and now that's the case. Remains to be seen how they're going to handle it. I hope that they're going to do a good job at implementing it, because sealed and draft does has a few challenges. It's very easy to cheat, to add some cards to your deck list, to your deck that you haven't drafted, that kind of thing, and those kinds needs to be, this kind of cheating has to be kept under control whenever you're organizing an event like that. Sorry. More PQ opportunities is also very welcome. I live in an area where, so in 2025 there were a grand total of 1 PQ in Ireland. For example, that's, in my opinion, is way too few. I think because it's very difficult for it's not normal that if you come from Ireland, the only other opportunity you're gonna have to have a PQ would be to fly somewhere else. So I really like the fact that PQs are gonna be a lot more local now, and I'm hoping for at least 3 PQs in season 1 before the Galactic Championship 2026 in Ireland, and I hope that other countries like this that are a bit isolated will also get more PQs opportunities, and I also hope that very competitive regions such as, for example, Poland is going to get more PQ as well. So the fact that putting more PQs across the board is really good. Now they need to place them in appropriately. The first criticism I wanted to address here is the judging in event. Overall, I'm not going to talk about whether the judges are good quality, because this is very much an individual problem. Some judges are great, some judges are not good. I don't know every judge, and I'm not behind them, so I have no idea if they're good. However, what I can talk about is the judge rules. And on the judge rules, it seems to be that overall the judging is way too forgiving for player mistake. So what I mean by player mistake is, for example, you make a play that's obviously not that's against the rule, and then you go, oh, was just a mistake, I'm sorry, and then basically you get kind of a pass. And the fact that right now the rules are very forgiving on this. So I'm going to take one of my own experience, my own example, to illustrate what I'm talking about here. So that was actually in Liverpool, which is the last large tournament that I attended, and basically I played against a player. He was playing the Nahal Village, the base that gives you a weird mulligan rules, and instead of drawing 9 cards, he drew 10 cards. And it turns out that I spotted that, and then I just said, well, I don't know how to resolve that situation, so I'm just going to call the judge and see what happens. And the judge call was that the player had to show his hand, that I had to choose one card among these for the players to shuffle back into his deck. And that was basically it. I think the player also got I'm not sure about this, but I think the player also got a warning. In my opinion, this is not enough of a punishment for something like this, and I'll explain you why. The problem is that in this case, I'm the one who spotted the issue. So the fact that I'm seeing his hand and basically choose one card, the card, it's not like a huge unless by a miracle, I managed to remove the only turn 2 play that he had, which is honestly which was not the case here. So unless by the circumstances I managed to remove like one super important card that makes you lose the game, it's very unlikely that me being able to choose the card that's going to be discarded is going to be that big of a disadvantage for that player. And however, if the player has basically drawn 10 cards, I don't know, maybe the player has drawn 10 cards on each of his mulligan all day long. And the moment he gets caught, all he gets is just a random card being shuffled back into the deck. That's not enough of a punishment. So once again, I'm really making the difference between if this mistake has been spotted by the player, the opponent, or the player himself. So obviously, if you realize by mistake that you drawn 10 cards instead of 9, and then he says, I'm sorry, I drew an extra card, let's call the judge. And then, in this case, I have no problem with a random card being shuffled back into the deck. And because you made a mistake, you realize you made a mistake, but when it's your opponent who sees the mistake, that's different. Because now suddenly, there's actually a fair chance that this was not so much a mistake, but something that someone just trying to abuse, that people would not see it, and take himself like a nice little advantage like that. Because keep in mind that it's actually quite hard to see when someone has 10 cards in hand or 9 cards in hand, because that's 10 cards is a lot of cards. So you don't really see the difference. The more cards you have in hand, the harder it is to perceive whether the opponent has one extra card or not. So it's actually not easy to see someone has 10 cards. In this case, I happened to just, I don't know, my brain clicked and I was just looking at his hand and it seemed to be a lot of cards. So I managed to catch it, but I'm pretty sure that about 80% of people would not have caught it. And obviously I cannot tell you how many times a mistake like this kind of went under my radar. So in my opinion is whenever your opponent catch the mistake, the player should be penalized more than that, because it should be treated as an attempt of cheating. So in my opinion, in this case, the player should have gotten a game loss, in my opinion, at minimum, for something like this. And obviously I have hundreds of other examples of player mistake being treated extremely leniently, in my opinion, while they were spotted by the opponent players. And for me, if you're making a mistake and that mistakes advantages you and your opponent spot the mistake, you should get very harsh punishment for that. Even if, because obviously it's very hard to make the difference between a mistake and not a mistake, but depending on the circumstance, also depending on circumstances. For example, there's a certain case where, for example, you already have lethal on board, you already won the game, and you drew an extra card. So drawing an extra card, of course, is a major offense, but the context matters. Like, if you were going to have lethal anyway, if you're going to win the game anyway, and you didn't need that extra card, it's easier to believe that that person was not trying to cheat. While if the person, for example, is drawing one extra card while they're basically on top deck situation in a very, very close game, that is a completely different story. So context matters, and I wish judges would take context into account whenever they make their calls in order to distribute appropriate punishment. And there should be really strict guidelines in the organized play rulebook to guide the judges to make calls depending on the circumstances. And some of the circumstances are context of the game, who spotted the mistake, what impact does it have on the game, does it benefit the player who made the mistake, how big of an advantage that was, that kind of things. And I feel like at the moment, the kind of human mistakes are treated way too leniently by the Star Wars Unlimited judge. And generally speaking, I think this is not good. This is very fertile ground for cheaters to take advantage of it. You can have, for example, a cheater drawing 10 cards of his Nile village the entire weekend, and if at the moment you only get caught, when you get caught, the only thing you get is just literally a warning and the card being taken out. That's all you get whenever you get caught. It is well worth the gamble to do it. So this is something that really has to be taken into account. Other subject I want to talk about is intentional draw. So one intentional draw has been implemented in Star Wars Limited to replace the double draw loss. I was actually very happy, and I thought that intentional draw was going to be a strict improvement, and I do believe that at least for the casual players, intentional draw is preferable over the double loss draw. I still believe that it doesn't make any sense that that a draw is basically worse than a loss, because not only are you getting a loss, your opponent is getting a loss, which is going to be damaging your goal average. So it didn't make any sense to me, and it led to a very weird situation where people would be randomizing who is losing the game instead of taking the draw, because a draw is effectively worse than a loss. So in my opinion, this was a very bad. The double draw was the double loss was a very bad rule. The intentional draw, however, also has a lot of problems, and I initially underestimated the problem. I'm gonna be honest. So, first of all, I clearly underestimate the impact of IDs on smaller events. I think that IDs work fine on very large events, because usually you can only ID on the last round of the tournament. And when you do, it's basically you are doing one draws over an event that has 16 rounds. So in this case, the impact of intentional draw is very, very small. And I also consider that if you manage to put yourself all the way up to the top by the end of Swiss, it's not outrageous to me that you are allowed to take an intentional draw and lock yourself into top 8. It's very different though for smaller events. In smaller events, I've seen multiple events now where it is actually possible to take multiple ideas, which I think is outrageous. You go into a 6 or 7 round tournament and there's a double ID at the end. That's ridiculous. That's almost 33% of the event that you are basically skipping, and you're also skipping the most important the most important game, the most difficult games. So to me, this is completely outrageous. It makes the event extremely luck-based, because basically, if you get good matchups and you get your 4 wins, and you can double IDs yourself into top 8, that's you're avoiding. You can be like not really a great player and make it to top 8 very easily in a PQ now, because you can literally just get your 4 wins, get your double draws, and then just cruise yourself into top 8, no problem. And I don't think that's a good thing for the game. So, in my opinion, on smaller events, IDs are way too big of an issue, in my opinion. It also has a very unfortunate effect to allow team play. So something I've also pointed out is the fact that whenever you got very large teams, and those teams manage to get a lot of players in contention for top 8, what those players would do is like they would actually take IDs or not take IDs in order to benefit their teammates to get into top 8. So the problem that I have with this fundamentally is that I think that team should be for training purpose, for preparation, motivation, but should not give you like a strict advantage in this game. And we shouldn't be in an environment where teams are allowed to basically lock out people that are not from teams to enter into top 8. And this has happened in the past. I'm not going to go over it, but this has happened in the past, and I don't think it's fair game. So obviously, I'm not criticizing teams for doing this. They are playing with the rules, but I believe that the rules should be different. And I think that as much as possible, IDs really benefiting large teams that are able to put a lot of players in contention for top 8, and that's not a good thing for the game. It's gatekeeping the game, and it creates an unfair advantage for those teams compared to regular players. And I'm saying this all very comfortably, that I'm part of a team that has a lot of very good players, so I would really much benefit from a system like this, but I don't want to benefit from it. I don't think it's fair game, and I don't want to be part, and I don't want this to be possible. Luckily, I think there's another way. So people are saying, well, if there's IDs, then you want to do double draws. There's no other options, but there are other options, which I'm going to talk about now. The best option that I personally see, and this is an option that a solution that has been suggested by, you can call me Al, is simply to apply the same tiebreaker rules that we apply in top cut games, and apply them to every game in the game. So it's a rule that's actually already in the game that I actually benefited from twice in top 8 of Birmingham, and it's a top 8 that says that whenever the time is called, if players have won the same amount of games, what is a tiebreaker is the players who has the most HP on the base. And if players have the same amount of HP on base, it's whoever has the initiative. And this tiebreaker rules has the advantage of basically making it so that there's never a draw in a game of Stars Unlimited. There's always going to be a winner. And so obviously this rule can look a kind of weird whenever you are using it for the first time, but once you know that this rule applies to every single game of Star Wars Unlimited, then suddenly it's part of the game. So now you have to play accounting for it. And I don't think this is a bad rule. I think it really, realistically, doesn't really give an advantage. I mean, depending on the circumstances, of course, it can give an advantage to a player, but this advantage is something that everybody plays by the same rules. So in that sense, if that influences the way you build your deck, then so be it. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, and this is just something that you're going to have to account for now moving forward. And the massive advantage of the system is that if there's no more draws, there's basically no more problems. There's no more IDs anymore. There's no more ties. There's no more like bullshit on that level. You gotta have to play every single game because it would be literally bad for you to not to. So the only question that may arise with the system is that obviously sometimes those very time sensitive kind of issue can require some judge overlooking those games, because obviously time is called. Sometimes if time is called at a very specific moment when the phase ends, that can be contentious. But I believe that this is a relatively easy problem to solve, because typically in every round there's only like a proportionate amount, it's a relatively small size of games. There's a relatively few games relative to the size of the tournament that actually draw every single round. So it wouldn't be difficult to have a judge overlooking those specific games that are time sensitive. So to me, that wouldn't be a problem. So I think I would like something like this to be at least experimented with. And I think this would be a net positive for the game. Moving on now to our side events. So side event, I want to talk about side event in Star Wars Unlimited. In this case, I think that FFG needs to understand that big tournaments need to be way more than that. They should be a celebration of the game. They should be a convention. And so far, the convention aspect of sector qualifiers, regional qualifiers, and Galactic Championship have been lacking. There have been some issues in every single event that have been... I think the only events that I know of that didn't have any issue with everything side event wise was Lille, if I'm not mistaken. But every other tournaments, I've heard some really bad things all over the place. So let me give you my vision on how I envision sector qualifiers, regional qualifiers, and Galactic Championship side events moving forward. First of all, people should have easy access to side events for MSRP and with attractive prize. So on the prize thing, there's nothing to criticize. I think they did a great job with the prize walls overall. But I think that the easy access, we saw those massive queues in the Galactic Championship to be able to play the side events or to redeem your prize. I think that's not normal. You shouldn't be spending more than 10 minutes in the queue on an event like this. I think that's really not acceptable. So the tournament needs to be organized in such a way that people don't have to wait around for this. The only thing that maybe should be, the only thing where you should probably will have to queue would be for signing your cards, if there's a celebrity that comes around and sign your cards. But that's something that, because we can't really multiply the person like doing this, while you can easily multiply the people taking care of side events. So another thing is like prize should be capped so everyone can have access to what they want in reasonable quantities, and of course avoid scalping. So let's say in a prize world you can get a Super Laser Blast. You shouldn't be able to get more than 3 copies of Super Laser Blast. You shouldn't be able to get more than 1 copy of the Showcase Luke, of the Showcase Vader, and so on and so forth. So I think this is something that really should be avoided. It's kind of obvious, to be honest. It's obvious that if you give very high value cards, and there are some cards that are way more valuable than others, obviously everybody is going to be wanting to have that card, which means that you're going to create this environment where whoever comes first is going to scalp them, and the people who are going to be coming after will be left with nothing. And it also creates a huge tension where people have to queue super early to get their prize, which create those massive queues, which are also a very negative experience. So creating cap would also basically make this less of an issue, where players are not rushing to get their prize because they know that no matter what happens, because the cards are capped, they will be able to get their cards no matter what happens, which I think is important. We should have often as possible, there should be a celebrity signing cards. Could be designers, but to be honest, designers it's kind of granted that designers are here at the event, and I don't think designers are going to spend all day just signing cards. But to me, there should be artists that basically sign cards, or Star Wars actors. So when I was at the content creator events in London, there were an actor, the I forgot his name, but the actor who plays General Draven in Rogue One was here to sign cards and to talk to people and stuff, and that was awesome. Honestly, I felt pretty bad having access to this, knowing that in most events we haven't seen any Star Wars actors showing up for the larger event. I think it would be much better to have those actors coming down for big conventions like this and available to the majority of players rather than just for selected few content creators. Personally, I don't really care about those things, but I knew that a lot of people do, and definitely having your cards signed definitely improve their value as well. So for me, it would be part of the convention to have celebrities signing cards as well. And finally, something that I'm really surprised we haven't had so far is a cosplay contest. Cosplay contest is very easy to organize. All you need to do is some pricing, which, let's be honest, whenever you are organizing an event, you have tons of pricing. You can dedicate a bit of this pricing for a cosplay contest. And we are talking about Star Wars. Everybody at home, everybody's fan of Star Wars. Like a lot of people who play Star Wars, they have at least 1 or 2 costumes, Star Wars costume at home, that they're gonna be bringing to the they could be bringing to the convention very easily, and then you can have a cosplay contest, and this would be super successful. I think a lot of people would engage with that, and it would create this very nice atmosphere where you have everybody showing up in costume. Not everybody, but you have a lot of people showing up in costumes, and basically giving prizes for this would be awesome as well. So once again, kind of create this celebration, create this thing that is beyond just competitive players, because if large tournaments are only going to be like competitive events, the problem is like in the long term, you're only going to have competitive players showing up to them. I've seen so many people who are coming to the Galactic, to come to those big tournaments, those big conventions with their families, with their loved ones, and having very negative experience. I think that those kind of events should go way beyond than just competitive players, and I think they should be for everybody, and they should be a celebration for the game, and it would be a wasted opportunity not to do that. And they should really be for everybody. Just going into my last point, I just want to let you know that you can pick up Craving Power on Card Market for €3 only. So one of the best rare in the set for less than €5. So pretty good deal. And keep in mind, guys, that when rotation comes around, Overwhelming Barrage rotates out. Craving Power is the closest thing we have to Overwhelming Barrage. So I wouldn't be surprised if the price of Craving Power would actually explode after rotation. Open decklist. This is an interesting question that was raised during the Galactic Championship, where they decided at the last minute to make everything open decklist. The reason for this was because some of the lists were revealed to some players for like 10 minutes. I'm still think declaring open decklist at last minute was a bad decision. So I'm not gonna go over this, but it raises another interesting question: is whether we think decklist should be open decklist on every tournament, yes or not. And there's some advantages and then some inconvenience to this, but globally my answer to this is that I believe yes. I think that making open decklist is a good idea, and it should be generalized to all competitive events. Right now, it's not apparently for all events yet. I don't think it's generalized to all events, but I think it should. I think every single event should be open decklist, and there's multiple advantages to this. The first advantage is it makes it harder to cheat. So let's say you are players and you want to add a couple of cards to your deck. you want to add a couple of cards to your deck. You can get deck check, of course, but basically, if reasonably you can only deck check a handful of players in a big event, and there's even events where there's no deck checking at all. So you could totally cheat and add a couple of cards in your deck, and and basically never get caught, and swapping a few cards in your deck, and you basically would never get caught. If you're making the deck list public on Melee, and your opponent has access to the deck list, and see that you're not playing those cards, and you end up playing them during the game, that the players can enforce by themselves the rules. As much as possible, you should allow players to enforce the rules by themselves. And in this case, you can do this by making open deck lists. So it would be a lot harder to cheat on your deck list when your deck list is made public through Melee. So that's something that's really, really good. The other thing is, like, it makes team scouting useless. So right now, technically, you can have teams having players roaming around and sharing information. Okay, this player is playing this, and this, and kind of scouting through the event. This would make this completely useless. So that's another positive. As much as you can eliminate the team advantage, the better, in my opinion. And once again, it's coming from someone who is in the team. And so the main inconvenience of making open deck list is that it makes innovation less effective. And it is true to some extent, because people have access to the full deck list. It's harder to surprise your opponent. It's harder to take someone by surprise. And this is where I want to separate real innovation to just what I call cheesy silver bullet. So what I mean by this is, real innovation is a real new deck with a real new concept that people don't know how to play against. And a really good example for this is the Thorrk in Town deck that we saw the Bottom Network play. So obviously having their deck list being revealed was a huge disadvantage to them, but because this deck is so innovative and his approach to the game is so different than one we've seen before, and it really requires very specific answers, and people really don't know how to play against, the Thorrk in Town deck was still very much a deck that was going to surprise the meta. And that was very much a deck that, if you place an event, even if the event is open deck list, you still have a huge advantage for playing a deck like this. So I believe that open deck list does not necessarily mean that it's impossible to innovate. And actually, I still think that despite the open deck list, the Bottom Network team with their Thorrk in Town still did amazing, despite that, which proves that knowing the list is not everything. You also need to understand how to play against. However, what open deck list really, really punishes is people who are trying to put cheesy silver bullet in their deck. So for example, you're playing in your deck, like, I don't know, you're playing a random card that nobody plays, that in some situation can completely blow someone out. And it's the kind of card that you can kind of surprise your opponent with. And so you change it, so you're basically playing a standard deck list, but you just have a couple of cards here that completely surprise the opponent, and if your opponent doesn't play around it, can completely blow the opponent out. Let me give you an example. Or let's say you're playing a restock in your deck. You're playing a random restock, and the control player plays against you, and you just play his last copies of Vigilance against you. You're playing against and your opponent just, oh yeah, by the way, I just play restock. That kind of thing. I am actually pretty happy that this is not something that would be encouraged by this, because in my opinion, it's not really skill intensive to do this, and it's kind of like, it's kind of cheap, and it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm glad that that actually the information would be public, so then you know what to play against, because otherwise you really feel like you're being blown at by random stuff, which I don't think is good for competitive play, especially at a high level. So I think that making the game less random and less kind of cheesy, and making it more skill-based, where people can see the list and adapt to it, I think that's a positive change for the game. So certainly makes innovation less effective, but it at least prevents people from doing cheesy stuff, which I think is a good thing in my book. And once again, it has other advantages. So personally, I'm fully in favor of it, but once again, it needs to be announced beforehand. It needs to be announced on the tournaments beforehand, not be changed at the last minute after people already submitted the deck list, obviously. And that's it for this video. So let me know if there's anything else you guys would change about organized play to make it better. Is there anything that you would like to see being changed? Either do you agree with the point I've raised, or do you disagree? And if so, why? And let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for following that video, and I'll see you next time.